1970. Wow. Why don't we? Praise be, guys. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This week I'm going to be talking about 8 things that Irish women could not do in the year 1970. Now, I did draw inspiration from this from an article. It was kind of floating around a few years ago, and I had the idea recently to do a video on it. They're super interesting, so I'll leave the link down below, but let's just discuss them in this video as well, why don't we? So I think it's super interesting because obviously I'm Irish, love Ireland and all that jazz, and I think some people think like, oh sure, Ireland's great, like, and Ireland is, I love Ireland, but we also do need to talk about Ireland's history with its women and how it's treated its women. Just like everywhere else in the universe, women have been treated unfairly. There has been sexism, there still is sexism, but I think it's really interesting to talk about the way things were and the positive things that have changed and are no longer that way. So it's kind of a sad video, but also a happy one because these things are not in force anymore. So that's good. So let's jump right in. So number one, in the year 1970, if you got married, you had to leave your job in the public service, so like if you were a civil servant or whatever, or if you worked in a bank, like you just, that was it. Like you got married, you had to leave your job. That was just the law, which is outrageous, but that's just what it was. And I guess like the rationale was just like, yeah, like you were married, so you had a husband who could support you, you didn't need the money, and you were taking away a job from a man. So you had to leave. So yeah, hilarious. Thankfully, that is not the case anymore. Number 2, effectively, you couldn't sit on a jury. So in the year 1970, to sit on a jury, you needed to own property. So it wasn't like women couldn't sit in a jury, but a lot of women didn't own property. So in effect, there was going to be no women on juries, which, as I hope we all know, is outrageous because juries are meant to be made up of your peers and they're meant to be your peers judging you, and if you're a man who's committed a crime and it's an all-male jury, you might get off a lot easier than if there was women on that jury who might not be as sympathetic to you or whatever. So really important that the jury is made up of diverse groups of people. So yeah, in the year 1970, women basically couldn't sit on juries. Yeah. Number 3, which I think is so hilarious, you basically couldn't be in a pub or like drink a pint. So some pubs like just refused women point blank, completely could not get in. Some pubs you were only let in if you were accompanied by a man, and like you basically could not be served like a pint glass of beer. You either had to ask for a half pint, like a glass of beer, like you just couldn't drink a pint. And I think it's so interesting because even now, like in 2020, it's still seen as like unladylike to have a pint or have a beer, which is like obviously bullshit. Like we're allowed to do whatever you want. But yeah, it's so interesting that it's, you know, that was like 50 years ago now, which is crazy, and it's still not seen as the norm for like a woman to like have a pint. You had to have a glass. And as the article says, like if you were like accidentally served a pint, you had to, they like would make you pour it into like 2 glasses, like 2 half pints. So hilarious. Number 4, which is another interesting one, basically families, whatever, with children would get paid like a child's allowance or child benefit or whatever. And in the year 1970, the man had to be the one to collect it. Like the money could not be given to the woman, which I think is fascinating because we all know the woman was the one wearing them, but of course the money would go to the father. Now, we should be saying our praises, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but if the man wanted to, like to say designate the wife to go get it, he could do that, but that was only like if he wanted to say give her that right to do it. Like she had no right to it other than that. Obviously that was like just completely up for like abuse because I mean the man might not give it to the children or the family at all, he might take it for himself. So like completely insane, and I think just more insane when we all know that the woman was the one doing the rearing of the children. So yeah, hilarious. And when I say hilarious, I mean not hilarious at all. It's just like, wow. Number 5, which is horrific, is that you couldn't get like a borrowing order against your husband or spouse or whatever if they were after like beating you or raping you or doing anything. Like if your husband beat you, like you just, like if you went to like the guards or anything, like you had to go home or just become homeless. Like you had there was nothing there to protect you, which is so insane. And I mean, like obviously we have that now, and are they respected? I don't know. Do they work? Hopefully to some extent they do, but it's like how insane that like you literally just had no right to like tell your husband like go away, like stop beating me. Like how insane is that? Yeah, you have to just go home and back to them. It's so crazy. Like, and like I think like the point of this video is I want to be like, this was only 50 years ago. Like it's so not long ago at all. And I think a lot of people women included, we like take a lot of our rights for granted because we think like, oh yeah, that's just how it is. But like, that wasn't how it was. Like, feminists had to fight for that to be the case. So yeah, I think we need to all be not like super grateful, like, oh my god, thank you so much, men, for giving me my rights that I deserve anyway. But we still do need to be grateful for the sacrifices that feminists before us made that got us here to this point now, where like if our husband beats us, something, no matter how big or small, would be done. Like, someone at least would care. So yeah, it's crazy. Number 6, which is so random, and I didn't really know this, is that so when you got married, your like place of domicile, like your legal domicile or whatever, like where you live and where you're registered as living, had to be the same as your husband's. Like, it just automatically became the same as your husband's. So the example they give in the article is that, like, say if you're in Ireland but your husband then just kind of like ups and leaves to Australia, and say you're split up or whatever, like you're married to him, so your legal domicile now becomes Australia even though you're not there at all. So like, so bizarre. And I feel like there are just so many kind of repercussions for that. Like, say if you're still living in Ireland and you need to get a job, or you need to get like, you know, tax, anything to do with tax or anything, or like child benefit or whatever, like your legal domicile is Australia. So the Irish authorities are just going to be like, no, we're not giving you this because you technically don't live here even though you do. So like, insane. It's just as if you like weren't a person, like just that second you got married you were now your husband, which is crazy. I don't like it. Oh, again, it's just not that long ago. Like, that was our parents. Like, oh god, makes me sad and icky thinking about it. Number 7, which is not shocking but still worth mentioning, is that women had no share in the family home. So maybe the man bought it, but like, I feel like when you're married, and I'm not, my legal skills are not brushed up on this one, I feel like when you're married you just have the share of the family home. Even if you haven't contributed money, I feel like I really should have googled this before this video. You should have ownership in the house. And even if you don't, like, it's like, I think it's the case that like your husband or whatever can't just like sell the home without your consent, you know, even if you haven't paid for it. Like, I feel like if you're married and that's where you're living, the husband can't just like sell the home. Whereas back in the day, the woman had no share of the house. And even if she was the main breadwinner or like she contributed loads of money, she still did not have the right to shares in the house, which is even more interesting. So like, the husband literally could just up and sell the house, no bother, without anyone knowing, which is crazy. Like, you could just be homeless. And like, you could have bought the house and then the husband could just be like, bye, I'm selling it, see you later. And you legally have no right to know or anything. Yeah, crazy. And then finally, which I think is one of the biggest ones, and thank God this is no longer a thing, is that marital rape was totally fine. And it was almost like the actual frame marital rape is almost like, is it like an oxymoron or something? It just, I don't know, it makes no sense because they're saying it was okay. Like, rape, the definition of rape is that you have no consent. But they're saying marital rape was okay. So even the term itself doesn't make sense, if you get me. Like you were just allowed force yourself on your wife and it was totally fine. Consent just was not an issue. It was just deemed as, you got married, so now you obviously consent all the time to doing anything, whatever he likes, which is so fucked up. And thank God that is no longer a thing in the eyes of the law. Obviously it still happens, as we all know, but in theory you would be able to press charges. That's a whole other vibe. And I think interesting to mention as well, which also says in the article, is that like, say a woman's adultery, so like a woman cheated on the man or whatever, the husband could sue the other man for like compensation for sleeping with his wife. Yeah, like, which like didn't happen if, say, like the man cheated. Say if the husband cheated, the wife couldn't sue the other woman for compensation. But if the woman cheated, that sexuality was like double standardly like punished. Which again, is none of this is shocking because women's sexuality is still has a double standard applied to it today. But yeah, interesting to note. So that is this week's video. I hope you got some kind of insight into what it was like for an Irish woman in 1970. Not great. Like, and like, I feel like this was all our parents' time, and I feel like this isn't really talked about. I feel like these things weren't really an issue. Maybe they didn't get married before 1970, but like, crazy. This is like our grandparents' time, like, so super interesting to note. Thank God things have changed. As always, we still have a long way to go, but it's nice to acknowledge the way things were and how things have come along, thank God, and hopefully things will move on even further. Praise be, guys. Praise be. See you in next week's video. Bye!